Good morning, everyone. This is Marianne with Truth Be Told. And I'm coming to you this morning just as I am, just me. I just felt led to share some things with you. For my premiere video, I had planned to do a teaching on prophecy, and the Lord disrupted my plans this morning, and He has a way of doing that, changing things according to His will, plan, and purpose. And what I really felt impressed upon sharing today was the message of what is faith. And I don't know about you, but I have had my faith tested and tried many times over the years. I've been walking with the Lord now 48 years this past April. And there was a time in my life where I was really into the word of faith. Name it and claim it, seeing things and sowing for things and believing God for this and that and framing my world with the words of my mouth and my positive confession and this and that. And it worked to some degree. But then life happened. And, along the way, let's go back to when my husband and I were first married. We were pretty much broke. This was back in 1977. I mean, we got off to a decent start. We had help with family, bought us some furniture. We got our first apartment. My husband was an apprentice boilermaker at the Norfolk Naval Shipyard. I was a school teacher at Portsmouth Catholic Elementary School, and things were going well. And then I got pregnant, and then I had to quit working, and then we hardly had enough money to make ends meet. And I became upset in a way because my dad, had a lot of money, but I didn't feel like he was helping me like he should. And so I got a bad attitude over that. And then somebody approached my husband at work about an MLM, multi-level marketing thing with Amway. And up until that time, my husband, he still is, but really was a fireball back then, sharing the gospel with everybody on his job. And in fact, he was denied a promotion because they said he was too much like the man in the middle. He wouldn't compromise and cheat and steal from one shop to bring material to his shop like they wanted him to. So he didn't get a promotion. I was mad about that. I got mad about a lot of stuff because I felt like, as a child of God, we should be doing better than this. So somebody came along with this MLM scheme for Amway, and we got into it somewhat. Of course, didn't make a dime. And so then we came across Kenneth Copeland and Kenneth Hagin and Jerry Savelle and I can't remember the other guy's name that would get on TV, and make these claims about if you sow your seed into this ministry, God's going to bless you 100-fold. This was back in the late 70s, early 80s, at the kind of the Renaissance, or I shouldn't say Renaissance, but at the beginning of the Word of Faith movement back then. And so I got hooked, hook, line, and sinker. And that's all I thought about. That's all I dreamt about. That's all I listened to was Word of Faith preachers and everything. And my emphasis was on getting. And like I said, it worked a little bit. Some things work, but my focus was really off of the Lord and more on stuff. So over the years, this continued, and we kind of wane from it, get snapped back into reality. Like, wait a minute, this isn't right. And we did join a really good Assembly of God church that was balanced and had a lot of good teaching. This was in Hampton, Virginia, Bethel Temple Assembly of God. Shout out to all my former friends and brothers and sisters in Christ that are there or have been there. I still keep in touch with some of them, and we had two good pastors. The first one left, Pastor Dan Livingston. He's deceased now, and the second one, Pastor Ron Johnson, came along, and this man walked in love. I mean, he was just, to me, the real deal of what a pastor should be. And simultaneously, we began to have problems with our youngest, a lot of emotional problems, a lot of rebellion. But we were heavily involved in church. I was in the choir, sang on the worship team. My husband and I led home group. We had uh, what do you call home groups, care groups. The church was pretty large. We had at that time, I think, about 1,200 members, maybe a little bit more. And the pastor was like, you know, you need to be in small groups, meeting and fellowshipping. And we got involved in that. Again, the sermons were very sound and balanced, and kind of brought me down from this faith cloud, hyper faith cloud, into somewhat more of a balance. But you know how cunning the devil is. And when we began to have problems with our daughter, uh, we just didn't know what to do. And after one particular incident that I will not go into detail about, um, she had to be hospitalized and feigned suicide. And when they do that, they, back then, at least in the state of Virginia, basically took custody of her, and we could not get her out. So found out that it was a manipulative way to get out of our authority. And again, we weren't perfect parents. We made some mistakes. And we didn't know what to do. So long story short, we had her in this place, had to transfer to a place that took adolescents, because they would not release her to her custody. So while all this was going on, I'm in a deep sleep one night. My husband wakes me up, shakes me, wakes me up, and he said, "Marianne, you got to listen to this preacher on TV." And I said, what could be so important that you got to wake me up from a deep sleep and hear this man? So I sat up and listened a bit, and it was like I was enthralled. I was amazed with this man, his eloquence, his silvery speech, his power, his delivery, the content, talking about faith and believing God and all these things. And then we just began to listen to him more and more. And the more we listened to him, the more discontented we became with our home church. And of course, feeling like, well, there's got to be more. We got to find some answers. And they talked about the miracles and the signs and the wonders and resurrection seed. And we began giving to this ministry and so forth. And so finally, we saw this one episode where they had a little boy that was born with encephalitis, and which is water on the brain. And they had medical evidence that through prayer, that the little baby's brain began to grow, and the fluid in his brain began to subside. And now he was able to see. He was going to be going to school and things. And we thought, wow, if God can grow a brain into a baby, he can surely do something for our child, who maybe she needs a new brain. Who knows? I mean, we just need a miracle. So we prayed, and the opportunity came for my husband. He was, I think, 42 at the time. I was 40. He was offered a Vera VSIP, which is a early out in the federal government. By then he had a good job. We were making decent money. We were paying our tithe. We were doing everything that you're supposed to do as a Christian, right? A good Christian, following all the rules and everything. So he took this early out, and he was going to take the money from this early out for his federal retirement. And we were going to pay off some medical bills we had accrued from the youngest child's medical issues and problems, and the rest we were going to live off of. So we sold our lovely home, more than half of what we had. We saved a little bit of furniture, but just sold it all, and we moved up there to Columbus, Ohio, and thus began the journey. And so needless to say, I'm not going to go into detail. I did an interview with Robin Torkinson. I'm sorry, Robin. Robin T. She's a beautiful young woman. Did an interview with her on Mega Maniacs, if you'd like to watch it and see more details about our trip up there to Columbus and World Harvest Church. I'm not going to get into it right now, because what I want to talk to you about is faith, what faith really is. So after disappointments and disillusionments and coming back from that, pretty wounded and broken, let's see, that was back in the 1996, we just kind of wandered around for a while, just with no direction, disappointment. We'd go to this church and that church looking for a home church. But clearly, we were not in the perfect will of God. And our pastor, Pastor Ron, warned us before going up there, anytime you go to follow a man, you're going to be disappointed. But our minds were made up. We had been duped into believing that that's what we needed to do, and that's what we did, and it didn't work out. So there was some shame involved, and the home church that we loved and grew and thrived in was no more. Now we were living in Richmond, Virginia. We decided to move back there to be close to my mother, who was a widow and by herself. And that's the town both Bob and I, my husband and I, grew up in. So we went back there and, kind of tried to dig ourselves out of depression and disillusionment and make a go of it. By then, we had a little granddaughter. Daughter got pregnant, and they were living with us for a while, and then she moved out, and we still had the granddaughter, and we just decided to focus on making things as healthy and as happy for her as we could. And we both worked full-time, got full-time jobs working as contractors for the government, because he couldn't go back into working directly for the government for another 5 years if he wanted to, because of the Vera visa he took out. So we worked for a contractor, and we thrived. We did well. And I got into the corporate ladder thing, trying to find fulfillment in getting raises and promotions and being popular at work, and began some social drinking and partying and this and that, and one thing led to another, and eventually was not doing too good spiritually at all. We'd go to church and go through the motions, but that was about it. And when my mom died in 2002, that was a real emotional blow to me. I was the only child. My mom and I grew very close once we moved back to Richmond. She was an abused wife, verbally abused, emotionally abused, as was I to some degree, but not as bad as she was. And we got to talk about a lot of things and grew very close. And she was a believer in Jesus. She sure was. But when she died, I was there when she passed away. Kind of rocked my world, to say the least. She was my best friend, my confidant. She had done so much to bless and take care of our family for so many years. And when she died, it just seemed like the glue that held us together just barely just disintegrated. And things didn't really get much better in our home life at all after that. And emotionally, I was pretty well grieved and shaken. So kind of went off the deep end there and basically became an alcoholic and drank my sorrows away. And one day, in a drunken stupor up in the attic, clutching my mother's overnight bag that I packed for her when she got admitted to the hospital, never came out, I had downed a fifth of Bacardi, and I shook my fist at the Lord, and I said, "You know what, Lord, you can take your gifts and callings, because it's not worth it. It's been way too painful." And then I started to throw up right there in the attic. And then that scripture came to my mind, how a dog returns to its own vomit and a pig to its own mire. And really, it was God, I think, correcting me, but at the same time, the devil heaping condemnation on me. And it took me years to sort out the pain and agony of some of the things that I experienced. But that was only the beginning. That was only the beginning.